I'm Dr. Jennifer Weeks. I am the owner and director of Sexual Addiction Treatment Services, which is an outpatient program outside of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And I'm also the author of The New Age of Sex Education, How to Talk to Your Teen About Cybersex and Pornography in the Digital Age. And so I'm here today to just talk to you a little bit about why I think this is an important topic to talk about, why I wrote the book, and why I think every single parent out there should be talking to their child way before they're a teenager about sex and sexuality and pornography and everything that goes on in the digital age in America's youth. Not just America's youth, everybody's youth today. Part of why I wrote this book was because many of the people who came into my practice had described situations or experiences of never having been taught about sex or sexuality, about having parents who avoided the topic. My younger clients come in talking about learning about sex from pornography, and for all of these folks who come into our practice, obviously these experiences have caused some damage in their life, because they're coming in for pornography addiction or sexual addiction, and in my practice also for illegal behaviors that stem from things like pornography and sexting. So I just kind of want to take a minute and let's talk about this. Sexting is something that is very common in today's youth, adolescents. The studies that are out there kind of have prevalence anywhere between 4 or 5% to 20-30%. If you talk to any high school teen in the US, they're going to tell you that sexting goes on all the time, and it's something that's just kind of a common practice in today's youth that we older generations sometimes can't wrap our heads around how common it is. And we don't necessarily always understand why, as older adults, that the teens would be doing this. And it's kind of become courtship for the younger generation. That back when I was young, we'd send notes or we'd flirt. Today's adolescents, they sext. They'll text. They'll hit somebody up. They'll use provocative imagery and text to flirt and to sort of engage in their emerging sexuality and to experiment with that emerging sexuality with their peers. So on the surface, it seems like, okay, maybe that's not such a bad thing because it's, a healthy, normal expression of their sexuality that's emerging. If that were, just the case, I wouldn't be here talking to you. There's a lot of troubles with sexting. If you look at the effects of sexting on boys and girls, there's some serious gender differences in how that is perceived socially and the boys and girls' experiences of sexting. So for the girls, they have what the science tells us, what the books tell us, the teens tell us themselves, is that they have a lot harder time with the sexting. They're pressured from boys to send naked imagery. They get asked for naked photos all the time from boys they don't know, from boys they do know, and they're kind of stuck in a quandary because if they send that that naked image that they're requesting, they're judged really, really harshly. They are, slut-shamed. They're called all kinds of really pejorative names around sending that image. So if they do it, they run the risk of being shamed. If they don't do it, there's also a social stigma there, and now they're a prude. So they're stuck in this sort of double bind where it's sort of, there's no win. And that's a real struggle for the girls. You can't talk about sexting without also talking about cyberbullying because these images end up going on social media. They sometimes are non-consensually sent, and the amount of cyberbullying that is engaged in with sexting is astronomical. There was a woman at a talk I did yesterday who worked in the school system, and she said the school counselors that she worked with dealt with cyberbullying every single day. So this is something that we have to talk about when we talk about sexting. When you talk about sexting in boys, there's a big difference. Boys are seen to, if they can get a girl to send them a picture, they've got some social prowess, they've got some cred. So there's a very big gender difference in how sexting is perceived and dealt with among young boys and young girls, or adolescent girls and boys. So I think We need to be talking as parents, as clinicians, as school counselors, as sex educators, about what sexting is and why we do it, and know that it might be a normalized behavior among today's adolescents, that it can actually cause some really great damage socially, emotionally, to the self-esteem, to people who are engaging in these behaviors. And cyberbullying is something that obviously can lead to immense emotional damage and even suicide for some people. So parents need to know that sexting is a possibility for their children, and be talking to them about it and helping them create resilience and boundaries about engaging in those behaviors. And I wanted to take a little minute to talk about online pornography and youth. It is very common for today's adolescents, teens, even younger, to be looking at online pornography. It is what I would say rather normalized in their culture. The average age of first exposure to online pornography is about 10, probably younger, so they're getting exposed to it very early. And again, some people will make an argument that'll say, well, you know, this is, again, an expression of sexuality, and not that big a deal. But when we look at the research and the science around early exposure and frequent exposure to pornography from adolescents, we see that it is not a benign concept. Adolescents who are frequent users of pornography tend to engage in sexual intercourse at an earlier age. They tend to engage in more unprotected sex, so unsafe sex with their peers. They also will objectify women more frequently than those who aren't frequent users of pornography, and that objectification is gender irrelevant. Girls who watch pornography frequently will objectify women as much as boys will. So, and it also, one of the big issues is that if you're learning about using pornography as your sex education, that's what you're learning that sex is, and it's giving these teens a hugely unrealistic idea of what sex is between two live people, what relational sex is. So watching large quantities of online pornography can give both boys and girls issues around body image and self-esteem, because most live people don't look like the actors in the pornography movies, who are, you know, they're in those movies because they idealize cultural perfection. And the other piece is performance anxiety. If I think real sex is what happens in a pornography video, I'm probably going to have performance anxiety about that, because again, it's an unrealistic expectation, because that's not what real sex looks like. There's, you know, it's a production, it's takes, it's all sorts of other things that happen to create that image. So the young men and women who are learning about sex and sexuality through pornography are getting a really skewed concept of what sex is, how it's supposed to be performed, how I feel about it. And so these, again, are things that we need to be talking about to them, you know, before they're teenagers, younger, to talk about body image and, you know, what it means to be sexual with someone, and what are our family's moral values around these things. So it's just a little snippet of some of the things that the adverse effects that can happen to children, teens, adolescents when they engage in sexting or they're looking at online pornography. And I don't want this to just be sort of a scare tactic, like don't let your kids do it. My main goal is really to just entreat every parent to try to figure out why they're not talking to their children about sex and sexuality. Is it their own lack of education? Is it their own shame about sex? Figure that out. Try to deal with that. Have those uncomfortable conversations with your kids about sex, about sexuality, about pornography, about sexting. Have them frequently, have them openly, and just know it's never ever going to be comfortable, but it just needs to be done. If you would like more information about how to have these discussions with your child, you can check out my book, which is, again, The New Age of Sex Education, How to Talk to Your Teen About Cybersex and Pornography in the Digital Age, which can be found on Amazon.com. Our website is sexualaddictiontreatmentservices.com, and I also have a blog site, which is Dr. Jen's Recovery Readings, that's DR, which I post a lot of things that aren't necessarily in the book, but also talk about parenting issues around pornography and sexting. And so thank you for taking a minute to listen to me talk to you about what happens when teens and adolescents are exposed to sexting and online pornography.